Welcome back, everyone, to Unhoused and Unfiltered. What a great day to be here. I'm Nick Cook, Director of Public Policy for the Michigan Coalition Against Homelessness. As always, I'm joined by
Sarah Rennie, Senior Director of Advocacy and Engagement. I guess I was trying to take your job there for a second.
I guess she Sarah just wants to do this podcast by herself.
Mm.
So no, it's a lot's been going on, Sarah. In this hot weather across the board. No matter where
Yeah,
you are, it's
I'm really
hard.
worried between the weather and the air quality. I'm worried about our folks who are living rough on the street. It cannot be healthy or safe right now.
No, I know last week I had friends going out passing out water to the unhoused just to check on them, just to make sure they're drinking enough water. Um, you know, as you know, we know senior population is increasing, and that scares me. We have people with disabilities living out on the street, some very, very disabled. I know of one terminal cancer patient that's living in an encampment. I can't imagine this heat and this air quality and living in an encampment.
No, and that's brutal. And so I'm going to make my pitch to our listeners. Please do join Micah to help us advocate for these folks. It's hard in the summer, hard in the winter. It's always hard to be living rough. And these are our community members, these are our neighbors, and we just need your help and support. So please join Micah at myhomeless.org. Also, because I like doing this podcast and I think it's helping people. We have been getting great feedback. Please remember to like and subscribe and share. Also, if you also like it, your reviews mean a lot. So please do also review this podcast before we get started today.
Yeah, and make sure you share it with your friends, your family, your grandmother, your cousin. Just get the word out there. Share this as much as we can because it is important just to talk about what we're seeing and how we are, and the state of housing and homelessness in the state of Michigan. Um, you know, when I'm out doing street outreach, Sarah, we go around the urban areas. We're trying to figure out what city park people are living in, what copse of trees, um, you know, and then as they are criminalized and pushed further out of the city, we have to go down river trails and try to find people. And to me, that's tough. I mean, we're chasing ghosts all the time, um, and I can't imagine what it's like in some parts of Michigan.
Yeah, I do want to say, as a rural kid, and I shout out to 4-H. I'm taking my kid to the 4-H, her 4-H camp this week. Just as an aside, if you have a rural communities, we do things a little differently. But there are homeless folks in your community as well. And it's different to doing advocacy, doing support, reaching folks. They may be in the woods or they may be on somebody's back 40. And it's the challenges are different. And I think we don't talk about it enough. I really, really am grateful we have a guest today who's just an expert. I have learned so much for her and just so much about what folks in rural communities in northern Michigan communities face when they're unhoused. So I'm excited to bring on Lisa Reinecke, who's the Homeless Social Solutions Director at True North Community Services. She's on our board, which we just are so excited that she joined our board, and she's our expert whenever we have a question on rural homelessness. So I'm going to ask her to introduce herself and tell us a little bit about who she is and why she entered this field. Lisa, welcome, and we're so excited to have you.
Yes, thanks for having me today. I'm really excited to be a part of this. So, as Sarah mentioned, my name is Lisa Reinecke. I am the Homeless Solutions Director at True North Community Services, but I'm also a licensed social worker and I serve on the board for Michigan Coalition Against Homelessness. I have been doing this work for 14 years. But I never thought that this would be my career, to be honest with you. Once I got started, I thought I was going to be a juvenile probation officer. But I moved back to my hometown after graduating from Northern Michigan University, and I applied for a case management job at a local nonprofit, and it was True North. Little did I know we had homelessness here. I had no idea. So when I applied and talked about why I wanted to do the work, I couldn't say that I knew that there was housing and housing instability here in this community. Wow, it was a big learning experience for me. Um,
Well, they were lucky to get you. And, we heard Nick talk about what he's seeing in Lansing and the more sort of park urban areas of Lansing, as far as the homeless population. What do you see up north? What's the same? What's different? Just tell us a little bit about your experiences.
Yeah, there's definitely similarities across all of Michigan. We're seeing people struggling to remain housed because housing costs have increased very dramatically, while affordable housing is just not keeping the pace. Um, we are seeing working families, seniors. I saw a statistic that most recently is 1 in 5 seniors are experiencing homelessness, which is insane.
Wow.
Um, they're on fixed incomes, they're disabled. It's hard to afford housing, especially when there isn't affordable housing. We are seeing veterans, young adults, kids aging out of foster care, and individuals who are on disability, and those who are working. It's across that in all of Michigan, and we see it here in the rural communities too. However, I think the biggest difference that we see in rural communities is that homelessness is hidden. Like I mentioned before, I would have had no idea that homelessness existed in my county or any of the communities I work in unless I was doing this work. We don't have large encampments. We don't have what you see in the news or the photos you see. We don't have people under the bridge or on benches in the parks. We've gotten a little more of that, but not near or anything. It's like a one-off. And we don't see a lot of panhandling, those type of situations. But what we do see is people are in tents, campers, especially dilapidated campers, their vehicles, they're down 2 tracks. They're way out there in the Manistee. So we have the Manistee National Forest in my area. So they're down in the Manistee National Forest.
And real quick, because
Yep.
not everybody's going to understand that reference, what's a two-track?
2 track. It's like, do you know what a seasonal road is? Or
Yeah.
an off road? So like it's this, you've got a wooded area and you have this little teeny path with like 2 tread marks going down. That would be your 2 track, and half the time you really need like a really heavy duty truck or Jeep or like a side by side. The little company car has a hard time getting down those 2 tracks.
So you go out there,
Yep.
you go out into the woods and find folks.
We do. So we have a great partnership with our local DNR and forest rangers where if they see or identify somebody who is experiencing homelessness, we went and did a training with them to kind of, I mean, it's hard to assume someone is unhoused, but there's signs, right? Like, this person's been there for 2 weeks, maybe hitting that 3 weeks. It's not just a weekend. They don't have a place to go home afterwards, so they don't have all their belongings with them if they're housed. They, if you're unhoused and you're staying out there, it's very intentional. Your setup is very intentional. You kind of get the vibe. You just really know. So we went and did some trainings with our forest ranger friends, and so when they find somebody, they will approach them with respect and say, hey, we work with the Housing Assessment Resource Agency. Are you open to having one of them come out and talk with you? And they'll get a hold of us, give us coordinates. They drop it into an app for us. It's called Avenza, and we can get out there. And typically a ranger will go with us too, so we have a good relationship there.
I was
But
going to
yeah.
ask, is it safe for you guys? Sorry, Nick, I just want to do a quick follow-up. Like, I think our listeners are going to be like, is that safe?
Yeah, so I've been doing this work for 14 years. I can tell you I've never been in an unsafe situation. Some of the most kindest people I've ever worked with are those who are unhoused. Um, it's all about respect and dignity. And if you're going out there with a good demeanor, approachable personality, you're okay. I mean, these are humans just like us. Yeah, I've never felt unsafe. My staff don't feel unsafe. And, sometimes we do feel, okay, this is a little bit of a scarier spot because maybe the environment's a little more unsafe, just getting out there or finding it. So we'll go together. We always do a buddy system. I don't want to say that, every situation is unsafe and we don't take the precautions, but we have check-ins that we have to do with our staff. I go with our staff if we're going out into the Manistee National Forest. A forest ranger will go out with us. In Muskegon, we have a police officer who is just genuinely super kind, and he'll go with us to encampments. Um, it's all about the relationships, but
Yeah.
I think
I,
people genuinely know if you're going out with good intentions.
I was just going to say, I hear this all the time. Well, aren't you scared when I go here in the urban area? And all the time I'm saying, no, that they're human just like I am. That they have the same wants and needs. They just are sleeping rough. And how can we connect them and create that human interaction? So I really appreciate that. But how long? I don't think people understand when they say you're rural two track out there. How long does it take you to get to some of these encampments on these two tracks?
Yeah, so I gotta say, I don't think I'd ever call them an encampment, but maybe a campsite.
Yeah,
Because they don't tend to camp together. They're pretty
right.
individualized and scattered. Um, so I'll just give you Newaygo County for a good example. We are 862 square miles if you count lakes and rivers and all of that. So we're very large. It can take you 40 minutes to get from one part of the county to the other part of the county. So it can take a while. I would say it takes a good half a day, but then you're spending an hour or so out there with the individual because when we do go out, we try to bring all the resources we can. So, like, you can see my little backpack in the corner that goes with us everywhere. I'm not a caseworker anymore, but I still keep it situated and ready. But we do the coordinated entry assessment. So we're doing the assessment right there on the spot with them. We are bringing out food. We are bringing out hygiene items. We are connecting them with other resources because we don't have standard transportation like everyone else in urban communities. We don't have a transportation system that exists. So public transportation is not here. So sometimes we're like the only people who can get out to them to bring them these resources. So all in all, it can take a half hour, 45 minutes to even get to the remote area. Then you got to find them. And then you have to start that relationship building. And then you can go into bringing them the resources. And sometimes we might not get all the way through something, but we're at least bringing them food and hygiene.
So
Yeah,
it sounds like,
it's that relationship. I think that's what people. It's about building that relationship. So thank you. Go ahead, Sarah.
oh, no, actually, I was going to say the same thing. It sounds like this takes some time. Um, this isn't a one and done sort of situation, right? What's the longest, or can you tell us about a specific client that maybe was out camping longer? Because folks are in all kinds of weather, right?
Yeah.
Camping for quite a long time.
Yeah, so housing in rural communities does not move fast. We don't have a lot of apartments that are available. Oftentimes, we are working with private landlords, and the turnover rate is pretty slow. Um, so sometimes people are out there for a long time. I have one participant who unfortunately passed away a year or two ago, but he got to pass away in his own home with dignity, so he's one of my favorite stories. But it goes back to the relationship. So this individual didn't necessarily come to us for services, but he was identified. I was notified when I was doing casework that he was unhoused. And so I went out to where he was staying, and I had an apartment that I could have put him into. It took me 6 months to build his trust and relationship for me to get him housed. I did get him housed in the exact same apartment, and it did take me 6 months because he wanted to be. I think so. That's where I want to go backwards. When you are in a rural community, oftentimes people don't want to live in apartment complexes. We see that with a lot of our unhoused. They're so used to being by themselves in the middle of nowhere, and that's a comfort thing. So when you're like, okay, we're going to disrupt that equilibrium you're in and put you in with a bunch of people, that is terrifying, and no one wants to do that. None of us want to do that, especially I think of us who grew up in a really rural community, and then you move us to a bunch of other area. We don't know how to function sometimes either. So this individual took 6 months to build that relationship with him. I would go out weekly, and I would go out when I say I would. I think that's the biggest thing too, is you show up every time you say you will. And I would meet with him. It would be snowing. We'd be sitting next to the campfire filling out applications, and he started to realize like I was there for him. And we did get him housed. He had severe seizures, and that's why he became unhoused, because he started having such severe seizures at work, and he was a high-low operator. He lost his driver's license. We don't have public transportation, and it just all kind of snowballed on him, and then he ended up living in a dilapidated camper. I can remember when he got housed because I stole the Christmas tree out of the True North lobby. I think I had permission, but it was right before Christmas. And I snuck into his apartment while he was signing his lease and stuck it up. So that's how I remember it was right at Christmas time, but it was right before that polar vortex. He
What a
would have died in
wonderful
that polar
story.
vortex.
And so often people say, well, people choose to stay unhoused, and it's more complicated than that, right? It's about, I imagine he felt trust issues and shame and fear of what it might be like to be back into a community. And what an amazing job you did connecting and building that trust. And I love that you got him a Christmas tree. Nick?
Yeah, that I mean, what a great story, and I think to again go highlight that we hear so much negative information out there about the unhoused population that it's a choice, that it's drug use, that it's mental health, where this was just a physical disability. He had a job. There was nothing he could do to avoid this situation. And that's you hear that story over and over again. It is in my experience. And what kind of to take this into like kind of a global perspective, and kind of discuss what's going on across the board. And for your homeless community, what worries you when there's so much negativity about the current state of homelessness, and other groups like the Cicero Institute and some of the movement to criminalize homelessness? What worries you, Lisa, about your population that you serve?
Yeah, so I think everyone wants a safe community, and I don't think anyone believes people should have to live in an encampment or live outside exposed to extreme weather, illness, violence, and trauma. No one should have to call a tent a home. And my concern is if these bans and criminalizations start to happen without realistic housing options and support, as you know, it takes really good case management. We're simply just moving people from one place to another, and homelessness is not disappearing just because they have to leave that campsite or that encampment. They're still going to be homeless even when you move them along. And so, one of the most important parts is building that trust. So it can take months before someone can really feel like they're accepted. And if we're constantly displacing these individuals, these relationships are going to be interrupted. We're making it even harder to connect them with housing, with healthcare, behavioral health services, and employment. The goal should really be helping people move into stable housing and not just moving them along. And I mean, we're already going to be re-traumatizing these individuals by moving them. The trust is going to be broken. We're not going to be able to find them. As you know, it's already hard to find individuals, especially in rural communities. So yeah,
It sounds like it's just it's making a bad situation worse. And one of the things I want to highlight, because one of the things I love about your work is that you are making your community safer through positive action. And before we even got onto the podcast, you were talking about sort of a kind of transformational work you're doing at the local libraries. And I think it's such a good contrast to arresting people. I was hoping that you would talk a little bit about the work you're doing at the local library.
Yeah, so we have a small so in most rural communities we don't have shelters, but up in Mason County we have a small men's shelter, and during the day they will hang out at our local library up there, and our staff are realizing that these individuals were spending their day there, and so my case managers show up every single Wednesday. They show up discreetly. People might not know that they're from True North, and we sit next to somebody alongside them and just start having a conversation and building these relationships. And we do pass out like hygiene items and things like that. And we don't necessarily always have funding to house somebody, but this case management, we're able to help them get all of the stuff they need to get ready, and they end up finding housing and moving in through that support. But because we've been showing up there, people have complained to us that these individuals are there. they are starting to celebrate when they get housed, which is like the best thing in the world. So I was up there visiting my staff, and one of the individuals was like, I'm moving in on Tuesday. And like everyone in the library is celebrating. And it
That
was
is
just
amazing.
so
That's awesome.
exciting.
That's great.
But the other cool thing that this has done is it's brought in other service agencies into this local library, and they're not just serving our unhoused population, they are serving anybody. So, like, one of these individuals was talking about like Medicare and Medicaid, and there was a senior man sitting over yonder, and he goes, well, can you help me with that? And he was just a normal Patreon, just coming in for a visit to check out some books. And so these resources are connecting to everybody, not just the unhoused. So we're showing that, not just the unhoused need these services and support. They're human too. And it's really keeping dignity intact. And I think that's the main thing. But it's created this community of celebration, even to the point where when these individuals are getting housed, they're showing up and having lunch. So I was sitting there, and this individual who was in our PSH program shows up. He goes, I just want to have lunch with you all and sit here. And it was just such a celebration. And the library did open up some of their policies and said, hey, yeah, you can eat lunch here because this is the only spot you can really sit down and have lunch. And so they really made the rules kind of fit, and not made it like put in extra rules to make it so they can't be there. We are taking kind of this model and taking it over into Muskegon County now too, where we have staff who are just kind of showing by example what it's like to just sit alongside somebody and have a good conversation and connect them with resources instead of feeling scared or nervous, because people do feel that. And we want to show everyone is human, just sit alongside them and have a conversation. It's surprising what you'll learn. And
I
so,
love I love everything about that. Particularly, I think our solution, what we've lost in a lot of ways is the idea of community, and you're creating community regardless of housing status, regardless of economic status. I also love that you're not asking the librarians to be social workers, you're bringing the social workers to the librarians. Like everything about that model is the hopeful opposite of what we're seeing in terms of the rhetoric. And I just cannot say enough how we need to highlight that work versus sort of, even if you don't agree that it's wrong, which I think it's wrong to arrest folks, it's also pointless because, like you said, it doesn't change their housing status.
this is
What
cost.
you're doing is creating healing and stability, right? I'm sorry, go ahead, Lisa.
I was just saying, it also just will cost more money in the long run. Your
Yeah,
taxpayer dollars are spending all of that there. Give us case manager some money, and we'll help you there too.
yeah, I was gonna
Yeah,
say, and it's a lot less, right? That you're expending than you'd be expending in jail.
yeah,
Sorry, Nick,
and
go ahead.
yeah, no, I was going to say that that's the one thing that's real in common with real common with the rural community in the urban communities is we see that in our street outreach. Every place there's a library, there's usually a congregation of those that are unhoused. It's during the day, it's a place for them to get some respite to get out of the hot air in the summer, cold air in the winter, to charge their cell phones, to connect with loved ones over email. So it is kind of a natural gathering point. So I loved everything you brought up about it, and that you are bringing your social workers there to have those conversations. And it is about building trust. Before we came on the air, you said if you can't have an awkward conversation, you're probably in the wrong business. Because it is hard to start that conversation, but when you think about it, that somebody's just like you and I that are humans just trying to survive, just having a conversation, see what their basic needs are, can go a long way.
Yeah, I think my whole goal in life is to prove the importance of hope and dignity instilling into those we work with, and that anybody can experience a housing crisis. It's not just certain individuals. Um, Disasters happen, natural disasters happen, economic disasters happen, um, and health. Health is huge. I can't tell you how many times I run into somebody and it's because of their physical health that they've become unhoused. And that can happen to all of us. We're not immune to it.
No, that is a very great point, because it's portrayed a lot out there that it is a choice, as we've already said, and so many times 33,000 unhoused Michiganders, that's 33,000 different stories. So, I really appreciate you highlighting that.
Yeah, I think I also just want to, because we have you here, make sure we've had an opportunity to ask, you know, what else can we do to alleviate sort of these pressures in a rural community? Because one of the things when we go to talk to decision makers in rural communities, is those concerns about lack of transportation, lack of money, um, really good. And I do think rural communities get a bad rap, rural decision makers get a bad rap. Lots of times they're trying to do what's best for their constituents, but there isn't the same kind of resources. So, what do you think would be helpful?
Yeah, I think that we just need to really strengthen the rural response or the homeless response system for one, investing in housing across the continuum. Maybe that's creating more affordable housing. We're seeing prevention is needed the most in some of our rural communities. I would say almost over half of our crisis calls are for homeless prevention services. Supporting landlords who are willing to rent to households, and really trying to invest in case management. It's we often say we like to walk alongside people on that journey, and housing is incredibly important, and it is just the beginning. Once someone is housed, we're able to focus on managing chronic health conditions, finding employment, rebuilding relationships, improving financial stability, and creating a life that they really want and that they could have success in. However, if we don't have the resources there after they're housed, it's really hard to help maintain that. So maybe that is having more affordable housing. So when we do get somebody housed who has zero income and they're working on getting their income, that their home is more affordable up until they can, get out of that situation. Or maybe that is having a better transportation system. All of those are great. But I truly believe as a social worker that case management is your key thing in being able to provide case management. Oftentimes when it comes to state and federal funding, you can only bill case management to so much. You can only do certain things. You can only work with people who fit in a certain little tiny box. In rural communities, a lot of times we talk about how federal and state funding don't match what is happening. There's rental units that aren't going to fit the whole inspection regulations, especially single room occupancies. Here, they might be a house that's divided and we don't have a sprinkler system in there, unlike an apartment complex that might have a bunch of single room occupancies in an urban area. So these things just don't match up the way that it looks like it should. Every single person is so different and unique, and that's where we need to have a case management plan that is developed for them specifically. We can't provide cookie cutter service. And I think that when we get stuck, that's all we can do with some of our state and federal funds.
I think that's a really good point because we need practical regulations, right? From I'm from a community where, people might have repurposed the chicken coop, but it's fine now. Like they've actually put in the drywall and plumbing, but it might not pass the federal inspection in the same way. I'm not in favor of substandard, but I do think you need to know the community that you're living in and and what the standards are in the community.
Look at a utility schedule, it's not going to tell you anything about a wood stove or a cherry pit burner. We have that
Exactly.
today. That's how you keep your home.
Yeah, exactly. That was actually something when I was working. It's like I would like some fuel oil money. What? Like, if somebody needed to fill up their pig in the they're in the fall because that's really, really expensive. Like understanding all of the complexities of rural living, I think would really help. And I'm just really glad you raised that. Because so often we talk about zoning regulations, we need to make sure we know what regulations are impacting rural communities, because most of the zoning regulation proposals we see are really about urban centers.
Anyway,
Yeah.
Nick?
No, and yeah, and I wanted to highlight something else you mentioned, Lisa, is it's a continuum. The homeless response system is a continuum from everywhere from coordinated entry to street outreach. And so often we pit one of those categories against the other when it comes to funding. And if we had the full continuum, You all would be able to do more of the outreach. You'd be able to get more people into stable housing, prevention. It really needs to be that full continuum. But we are in the summer here. We have people camping, hiking, doing all kinds of stuff here in Michigan. If if one of our listeners comes across somebody they think is living rough, how do you recommend they approach that situation?
Yeah, so the first thing I'm going to do is encourage people to lead with compassion. Remember that meeting someone on what may be one of the hardest days of their lives. If you feel safe, you can ask them if we are okay about connecting them to a local resource. You don't need to solve homelessness. That's a conversation that's rooted in kindness and can make a real difference. And there's experts out there who can help you through that. So don't take it on yourself, but you can be kind about it and make that referral for sure. There's local housing assessment and resource agencies that can respond to this. My case managers can follow up and build that relationship and connect individuals. But we have to remember that homelessness doesn't define a person. It's just the situation that they're experiencing, not who they are. And I think every person, deserves dignity, respect, and the opportunity to find that safe place to call home. And so just treat them as if they're human. Be respected, and just how you would want to be treated if someone approached you while you're on a walk or a hike.
Yeah, I think it's important for listeners not to be like, hey, it looks like you're living out here. Are you homeless? What up? Right? That's not something you would say to somebody on the street. Just sort of talk to folks like, maybe have some coffee and see what the story is rather than sort of make assumptions. Um, and even if it's appropriate, right, you can make a referral, but make sure you're respecting their choices and maybe they don't want to talk to a stranger about whatever's going on.
And if you feel
Um,
you're
okay.
unhoused, reach out to the local HARA and you can just say, hey, I saw this person here. Can someone go reach out to them and look out? My team will be happy to go out if it's in one of the counties we serve.
I also want to really lift up that because I know you're very good at what you do and you're doing it on a shoestring budget, right? Like you can you talk to the listeners before we tie up a little bit about how much money your program gets and maybe even put a plug in for donations because I think one of the things people don't realize is they think that an equal amount of money goes to all of the homeless systems and street outreach is one of those vastly underfunded, or in this case, forest outreach is one of those vastly underfunded areas.
Yeah, so the West Michigan Housing Network is what we make up for Lake Mesa, Newaygo, Oceana, and then we have Muskegon, which is part of the independent jurisdiction. So the four counties um, that I mentioned earlier, part of the West Michigan Housing Network, they share a pool of money. So in Lake Mesa, and Oceana, and Newaygo, they split the Emergency Solutions Grant, and mind you, it's got to pay our staffing too. So all of this funding that we get has to split into all four counties, which have a really big
I was gonna
area
say it's
to cover.
huge too. Can you
Yeah, I was
help
just gonna
people
say.
understand how big we're talking?
And it takes me just to go visit my Ludington staff way over an hour to get over to see them.
Yeah.
So I only have one staff member who works in the poorest count, one of the poorest counties in the state of Michigan, which is Lake County, and I have two staff who are in Mason County because they do get a lot more pickup with Ludington kind of being a busier little hub up there. And then I have one in Oceana. And then we are blessed to have a community foundation here in Newaygo County who funds us privately for some of the work that we do. And we have a couple other caseworkers here. But the homeless response system dollars that we do get is not a lot. I don't know the exact figure off the top of my head, but we are able to house, I want to say about 40-ish individuals per year through those funding, and then we can prevent homelessness for about 20 of them.
So one of the things I always wanted to emphasize because I think it's unfair when people talk about numbers. When there was always these grants of like how many numbers at the urban versus the rural. Um, it is important to know that every life is individually important and it can take you half a day to reach somebody.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
we have to look at the work, right? Go ahead, I'm sorry.
yeah, just like the mileage to get to and from there, the operating, I mean, and the leadership. And I want to let people know in rural communities, we're often the one who do everything. So
Right.
it's funny because I didn't realize like what a true horror felt until I was in Muskegon County, because we did take on Muskegon a few years ago, and that's a true horror. They're the assessment agency. That's all they're doing in a lot of ways. We have a little bit of rapid. In these rural communities, sometimes the director is the case manager, they're the HMIS administrator, they're the street outreach worker, they're doing all of it. And you'll see myself and my co-director, we still work alongside our staff as much as we can while running all operations to get housing going. And we're blessed. We have a little more staff than some rural communities, but they're doing the permanent supportive housing. They might be doing the veterans funding, the SSVF, doing the emergency shelter program dollars, which is motels, and that's a ton of work that does not pay for case management. Um, they're doing the longer term rapid rehousing and the emergency solutions grant, and we're the ones filtering out all the calls. I just looked at our call log the other day. We get thousands and thousands of phone calls a year, and 17 to 20% of the phone calls we get are not housing related. They're needing just support and resources, and we are that trusted entity that they feel safe to. So they're contacting us. And a True North model is you're going to walk alongside everyone who's in a crisis, and we're going to provide you some sort of support, even if it's a short term case management over the phone and crisis intervention. So our staff are just housing staff. They're the everythings, and that happens for all rural communities.
I just want to say how lucky we are to have you in the field. That kind of compassion is just completely irreplaceable. And we thank you so much for coming today, the work you're doing, all of your insights, and just your support of Micah. Thank you again for showing everybody how to do it. And we're going to continue to try to find ways to replicate your model as best practice.
I appreciate you both so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.
Wow, Nick. I so much that she said was so important. One of the things that I love about Lisa is she's very quiet about it, but she's doing things that are making things better, which is always harder, right, than tearing things apart. And in creating community, the other thing I really wanted to bring to your attention, and you're probably seeing this in your own work, the idea that there's 1 in 5 seniors that are homeless.
Yeah, and I was going to bring that up, but I being the statewide advocacy organization, Sarah, as you know, we get to talk to people all over the state, and that's one thing I keep hearing over and over and over again is Nick, we're seeing so many more senior citizens. I was talking to a room at the inn up in Marquette, the other day. They were saying 27% of their people are above the age of 55. I see it in the encampments in Lansing that I go visit when I'm doing street outreach. All of a sudden, you'll see two or three more senior citizens there. You're like, where did you come from? And they said, I can't, my landlord evicted me. We had a fire in my complex, and we all had to move out. We only got a week at a hotel. Our apartment's not ready. I can't afford to go somewhere else. You hear these stories over and over again, and what are we doing that we're not taking care of our most vulnerable citizens, especially our senior citizens, those that have disabilities, and that we're putting them back out on the streets. And that's not only in Michigan, but across the nation. We're seeing more and more senior citizens um, living rough.
Yeah, and I grew up in a rural community and then I practiced for a while in a rural community. And seniors in more rural communities that don't have access to as many resources, they don't have transportation. I would have people call me, when I'm scheduling an appointment, just to confirm 2 weeks out to make sure that I knew that at 2 o'clock they went to the doctor, and at 11 o'clock their grandkid was coming over, and it's because they were looking so much for that connection. And I think it's why I'm so passionate about making sure that we're paying attention to the conditions in rural communities, particularly for our seniors and our most vulnerable, and making sure folks understand, you know, that the what is often proposed structurally by the federal government is not going to fit, like the issues around firewood and heating. And so I just really think we need to understand that it looks different, but doesn't need any less attention.
No, and I agree 100% with that. And, when we start talking about the criminalization of homelessness and pushing, we heard Lisa say it takes her half hour, 45 minutes to get back to some of these camp locations, and then to try to find the individual specifically where they're at can take even longer. And then you're spending a half hour out there. Now she has built a relationship with that individual over 6 months. And then next thing you know, a local camping van comes in, the police force them out of there. Now she's trying to find them again. Now what? She starts over, and those, I don't think people understand what the second and third order effects of things like a camping ban can do.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think I want you to really, in addition to the work and the person that she's focused on, which is, Lisa's amazing that way because she's very focused, other focused, that is also, 6 months of driving in all weather, down 2 lanes with, coffee, hoping to connect with someone, building trust, trying to understand who that person is and what their needs are. It's, um, it's devastating when someone arrests them and or moves them on for both Lisa and the person, as well as just you know not economically making any sense, because she's the one who's going to get the solution resolved, where criminalization is just like, well, we'll put you in jail for one night and then move you along. It is an incredibly short-sighted policy.
Yeah, and I mean, we to go back to the senior citizens. I can't imagine a lot of police officers or sheriffs being excited to arrest somebody that looks like their grandparents,
Oh yeah.
just because they're unhoused. So, that also puts our law enforcement in a very s- un unattainable, or well, what's the word? A position that they don't want to be in. They want
Absolutely.
to.
Unenviable, I think, is what we're going for. And
Yeah.
I also want to highlight before we sign off, that the law enforcement that Lisa messaged that just goes out with her to resolve it. Every law enforcement officer I've talked to is more likely, especially in rural communities, to be working with their community to resolve these issues, because they know these people and they don't have any desire to have them, in jail. They know that's not going to solve anything. And it's taking everybody away from like the work they want to be doing, which is getting the bad guys.
Yeah, and I want to highlight that our partners in Indiana, when their statewide camping ban was signed into law, the Indiana State Sheriff's Association was opposed to the camping ban. They understood that it wasn't going to solve homelessness. They knew it would put that their officers in an unenviable position. So, as we have these discussions about camping bans, I encourage everybody to talk to your local sheriffs, to talk to your local police, chiefs of police, to see, you know, what their thoughts are on this, and make sure we're talking about this in to our elected officials in our community, so that we get ahead of this and don't do these camping bans or loitering bans in communities.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Nick. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, everybody who's tuned in. Let's keep working on this. And for our listeners, please, please, please like and subscribe. Come along with us on this journey. Share this. Recommend it to your, like Nick said, your grandma, your cousin, your friend, Facebook, social media. And please join Micah at myhomeless.org. Nick?
Thank you, Sarah, for having this conversation with me. I'm very passionate about street outreach. I love going out and making the connections with our unhoused neighbors. And I'm glad we can get on this podcast and share the stories, share information to demystify the unhoused community. They are individuals like you and I that are just looking to live with dignity and have a safe place to lay their head down at night. So I look forward to our next conversation. Every week has been a great opportunity. We will see you all next time on Unhoused and Unfiltered. Thank you.
Thank you.